in full presentation mode. Everybody seeing this? Okay, great. Thank you. Branda, do you want to start with the first slide?
Sure. So, well, we've realized that the synergy between art, media, and science is at the essence of what we're doing. And also the interconnectivity is for social justice, the struggle for social and environmental justice, and also the idea of honoring DIY action, do it yourself from the grassroots up. We use art, science, and participatory action to promote social and environmental justice and creative expression. And that's the front of the sanctuary, which was painted by youth and artists. I'll pass it on to Kathy for the next slide.
Thank you. So these are some of the projects that we're involved in and have been for years. The sanctuary has been around for about 16 years now. And so we have things like College City Growers Gardens, the Sanctuary Radio, our own low power FM radio, Sanctuary TV. We produce a lot of media for about not just performers and presenters that come to the sanctuary, but also events that are going on. The youth TV also, and youth projects, including Uptown Summer, which Brand is overseeing right now, the Nature Lab, and People's Health Sanctuary. And we'll get into talking about both those in a second. If you look at the map on the upper left-hand corner, this is actually a map of the block between 101st and Glen on 6th Avenue in North Troy. And what we've done as a strategy is to sort of take over abandoned buildings and lots on this one block to build this campus of ours with gardens, regenerating forests, food forests, a public park with Freedom Square, which is in the upper side here. The sanctuary's here. There are College City Growers Gardens, and then we have the Nature Lab and our L lot and a residency space. And then this is the sort of area that our radio reaches, the kind of, distribution of the signal. And I'll pass it back to you, Branda.
So you can see here our connections to the Nature Lab Environmental Education Center. Not long ago, I mean, it seems like forever ago, really, but it was actually in June, we inaugurated the space. And so what you see at the top is Sebastian and our two water justice lab youth who are standing by the Hudson, and Sebastian is training them how to sample. And once a month, they are sampling the water from the Hudson. And they're actually going to be coming together next weekend to do that. You can also see that we connect art with our ecology education. And so you can see sturgeons that have been painted on the street. The sturgeon has become our motto. We actually have t-shirts that say resist in the sturgeon, kind of inspired by the sturgeon's struggle to survive from extinction, and it's getting stronger and stronger. This summer, our Uptown Summer youth actually have created a new word for the sturgeon. We're about to make new t-shirts that say resilience. And part of the resilience is the space, this other photo you're seeing, which is upstairs, which is the People's Health Sanctuary. A few years ago, when our youth led a community design think tank as part of our process of building the biology lab, a level 1 biology lab on the first floor of the sanctuary. And what they learned from the community is that we can't have a biology lab in North Central Troy, an environmental justice zone between the blocks of Glen and 101st Street. We can't have that in that economically impoverished neighborhood without having a space that addresses trauma and self-care. And from that, the People's Health Sanctuary was born before the pandemic, but it actually has kind of risen in energy and networks and excitement. And so this will be the next space that we develop, is the upstairs. And then you can see the lab there. And we're just very excited also that our Uptown Summer students just last week actually learned how to sample. Dan was there with Abby and Kathy, and they sampled for lead in the soil, and they chose their own location and led us to the Troy Central Little League lot where they took samples. And then we actually had Dave Walker come in, who's working with the Norlight group, and had our youth test dust on the windowsill of the sanctuary and on the windowsill next door of a neighbor to see if Norlight's dust is indeed coming across the river just 1 mile away. And actually those tests just came back, and yes, they found the particles from Norlight on our windowsill. On Wednesday, we're going to be testing the soil samples from the North Central Little League, so stay tuned. And the youth are taking the leadership role in this with the thanks to the Our Soil Project. Kathy?
Thanks. So we have 2 projects which are occurring now, actually 3, as Branda mentioned. We're looking at air, soil, and water, and how to protect those 3 areas. The first one is the Water Justice Lab, and this is a collaboration with Riverkeeper. They've been incredibly supportive to us throughout the past year and a half, really. We've been developing this project with them. We ran it last year. These are our youth scientists who have been working with us, Shanzanique, Genesis, and Gabby, and they have been amazingly testing the waters of the Hudson River for Enterococcus to make sure it's still clean enough for us to swim in. And then, of course, the project we're talking about tonight is Nature Lab's soil project, our soil justice project, which is soil in the city, or otherwise known as Our Soil. And this is what we're talking about tonight. Here's the team of it. And I'm going to stop sharing here, and we'll get back to all of that as we keep talking. So thanks very much for listening to our intro. And I'd like to introduce Sarah Bachinger, who is here as our Nature Lab communications coordinator. She's our sort of local neighborhood communications person who has just come on recently. She's done an amazing job. And Sarah, I'll pass the wand over to you.
Thank you, Kathy. It's great to see everyone tonight, and great to see some of the fellows I spoke with on the phone this week here this evening. I'd like to kick off this as well to introduce the team from Our Soil. I will pass the mic over to Abby Kimchi, who is one of the leads in the project, and I'll have her introduce herself and just talk a little bit about what this project means to her.
Great. Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. And hello, everybody. It's great to see you. My name's Abby Kimchi. I'm a sociology professor at RPI, and I do most of my work about environmental justice in communities all around the world. And I'm really excited to be part of this project and leading this project here in Troy with a bunch of really great collaborators. So I'm very much looking forward to getting to know all of you. We're going to do some interactive things today to get to know each other a little bit more and share what our interests are. But for me, what interests me about this project is thinking about the ways that doing science together can actually help us to organize together, to strategize together, and to think about making social change together. So that's a little bit about me. We'll talk more as we go on. Maybe I will hand things over to my collaborator, Dan.
I think you're muted, Dan.
How about now? Sorry about that. My name's Dan Walls. I'm working with Abby at RPI on this project. And I just, really started thinking about soils in the last year and a half of working on it. Feel like we've learned a ton about soil, about lead in soil, why it's in city soils, and, what we can do to test it and what we can do to protect our health, if we find it. So I'm really excited to start, sharing what I've learned and, working with everybody in these workshops. And I guess I'll pass it to Monica, another collaborator of ours.
Hello, my name is Monica Ramirez, and I'm at the University of Arizona, located in Tucson, Arizona. And I'm an environmental health scientist. I'm based in a Department of Environmental Health, but have a joint appointment in public health as well as a global change program at the University of Arizona. And I focus on and work collaboratively to co-design community projects with communities neighboring, mainly mining and different types of resource extraction that occurs within Arizona, as well as along and within the US-Mexico border region and within Mexico. And I'm very excited about this project because the idea and the spirit is the democratization of science and the tools to understand our environmental quality more, to inform decision making and protect the health of the ecosystems and the humans within that. And so thanks so much, and I look forward to getting to know each of you more.
Why don't we pass it off to Saeed?
Yeah, pass it out. Yeah, I'll pass it to Saeed.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name's Saeed, and Salvatore Engel Di Mauro. I'm at the geography department. I'm a geographer in SUNY, or State University of New York, New Paltz. And I'm not going to repeat, I suppose, all the very eloquently stated reasons for my excitement as well, which would just repeat what Abby, Dan, and Monica have just stated. I specialize in soil contamination processes, and very keen on as well the social justice, environmental justice components of soil contamination. This is one of the main reasons, I suppose, why I'm involved. Not sure to whom I should pass a word on, but I am done with introducing myself.
Hannah, could you introduce, thanks Saeed. Hannah, do you think you could say a little bit about your involvement in this project? Hannah's new, she's joining us just this summer.
Hi everyone, my name's Hannah Price. I'm a student at RPI. I'm actually one of Abby's students. I'm here this summer to help take some ethnographic notes about the different meetings that you guys are going to be having, and kind of seeing how the community engagement process of this project works out. So I'm really excited to be on board. I'm really excited to see everyone here. So thank you.
Awesome. So then I think I'd love to get to know everybody else who's on this call. And I know Sarah's been connecting with the different fellows. Maybe, Sarah, could you maybe bring people into the conversation?
Yeah, it's great to see some folks here. I see, let's see, who is first in my list? Azure, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what this project means to you and why you are interested in our soil?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Azure. I live in Lansingburg, which is a neighborhood in Troy, New York. I'm an avid grower. I've been volunteering on the sanctuary grounds for 8 years, puttering around in the soil there. And I am also a mother of 2 boys, ages 2 and 5, who have had high lead their entire lives. So we are outside all the time, and I want to be able to continue that, and also have agency in like how we are, stewarding these soils, and also be able to, increase my skills in, like, people are talking about DIY science and democratizing science, and being able to just like share that with our community, especially like just like on our block here. So that's me. Should I pass it on to someone? Nikki?
Yes, great.
Hello, I'm Nikki Rogers. I have been affiliated with the sanctuary for a couple of years now, on and off, offering yoga inside of the beautiful chapel-esque space there. I ran into Dan at the Juneteenth celebration at Geneva Pompey Park, And my family's from Troy, my father and his 4 sisters grew up on Ferry Street. My grandparents owned that building. And just, I love Troy and everything about Troy, and just jumped right into the conversation with Dan. And I feel like I was annoying him. I was like, wait, tell me more. Wait, what are you going to do with all these findings? This is amazing. So I'm not located in Troy, but I'm in Latham, and I spent a lot of time in Troy. I was listening to Branda, hi, how are you? Talk about the sturgeon, and the mural at Pompey Park is of sturgeon, and the mural says perseverance over it. So I think it's just it's just a beautiful sentiment, and the resilient word, and the emblem of the sturgeon, and this digging into this social justice, environmental justice issue is so important. And I feel like this project, and you guys are all amazing individuals working on it, I think it has a lot of potential to draw more attention to environmental justice in urban settings. So I love it. And okay, I'm passing along to Rania.
Hello, everyone. Sorry for my camera being off. I knew you were gonna.
I'm over here making dinner, so camera was off too.
Okay, I'm Rania, and what brought me to this, the soil justice workshop is I'm interested in growing my food from the ground up. I'm currently a renter, but I plan to purchase a home, and so I want to know a lot more about the soil. Let's see.
That's great. Thank you, Anya. And I think the only one we have left is Eileen.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eileen Javier. I am a volunteer for the Sanctuary for Independent Media. I produce pieces for the radio. I'm also a board member, and I also live in Lansingburg area. So I would like to know basically how safe is our soil. A lot of children I see playing in the ground, and I think by learning what is it in the soil, I can bring aboard more members in the community that I live in. So therefore, I want to know more to be able to, if not give all the information, at least direct the people to you, the experts. And the more people that we bring aboard, the more awareness we create, and people start understanding that we can make a difference if we work together, just like in the comic book. Basically, that's what I want to do. And I'm happy to be here. I hope I can learn to do the training. I am just trying to feel, this into it, because I think what you do is really, really important. So I'm happy to be here. And I have the camera off because I am cooking and I am listening, okay? But I just don't want you to be disturbed by me moving around.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Abby, I will pass it back to you. I think we covered all of the fellows that are here tonight. Thank you all so much.
Great, thank you. I'm just so amazed to have the opportunity to work with all of you. This is really very exciting, and the questions you're bringing to this are exactly the ones we really want to tackle together with you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share some information. Well, and all of us on the team will share a little bit of information first, and then we're going to go to an interactive activity that's going to move us toward thinking about all these questions that you've been asking. Where are the places where we'd like to know what's in the soil so that we can take action to make sure that we're playing safely and gardening safely and then improving the quality of our soil? So I'm going to share information first, and then we're going to do some brainstorming together and make some decisions. So let me share my screen. Just give me a second to get it going here. And oops. Here we go. Oops. All right, I'm just going to change this so I can see a little better. Okay, so we are, all of us involved in this project are really interested in thinking about how caring for soil can give us safer places to live, to garden, and play. We often, those of us who live in cities, often don't think about soil as being such a part of our lives, but of course we all rely on soil to grow our food. We interact with soil when it gets into our homes as dust, or we track it in on our shoes and our clothes. And of course, soil is at the base of all the places where we play, and we want to create safer places for our kids to play and to grow. So I want to share a little bit about the impact of lead on children's health and development. In this project, we're going to be looking not only at lead, but we're going to look at some other heavy metals as well. But today I want to focus on lead because I do think that it's going to be the metal of major concern in Troy in particular. And I'll explain a little bit about why I think that as we go forward. But we will, in our future workshops, we're going to be looking at arsenic. We're going to look at copper as well. So why are we so worried about lead? Well, I think probably everybody here already knows that lead exposure can seriously harm children. It can cause damage to the brain and nervous system. It can cause slowed growth and development, learning and behavior problems, and hearing and speech problems. And so all of these things combined can really affect how kids do in school, right? What their intelligence seems to be, their ability to pay attention, how they perform in schoolwork, and also just all aspects of life. And it's important to know that really no level of lead exposure is considered safe. If you have kids and they've been tested for lead, my son got tested for lead, I think at age 1 and age 2, or 6 months and 2. And he also had lead in his blood. And while it was at a level that was considered sort of below the intervention point, I knew that no level of lead exposure was considered safe. And so we thought about how to change what was going on in our environment so that he wouldn't be exposed to lead anymore. And that's one of the goals that we want for everybody here. So how and where are we exposed to lead in the environment? Well, most of us, if we're getting exposed to lead, it's in our homes. It can come in as dust from degrading paint that contains lead, dust from the environment, in the soil that has lead, the soil itself, as we're focusing on here in this project, and we'll talk more about. But of course, you've probably all heard about places like Flint, but many other cities as well, where old infrastructure for water is actually bringing lead. Lead is coming out of the pipes into the water. And then, of course, old paint is a really big source of lead as well. And in fact, it's estimated that 37 million housing units in the United States contain lead-based paint. So this is a lot of lead paint that people are being exposed to in the United States. So why should we consider soil a pathway for lead exposure? Oops, this is stuck. Well, the main reason is that small children often put dirty hands in their mouths. So here's a picture of my son, who I'm an avid gardener as well. And when he was this small, he was always putting dirt in his mouth or getting dirty hands and putting them in his mouth. And this is a problem for all the reasons that we've just been talking about. But we really want to unpack, how is it that soil could contain lead? And some of the main sources are industrial pollution, old lead paint on the exterior of buildings, and also many decades of burning gasoline that was leaded gasoline, meaning it contained lead. And so when we burned it, exhaust went into the atmosphere, distributing lead throughout the environment, and it still sits in the soil today. So let me talk a little bit about those specific things, that history. Lead in residential paint was first restricted in 1978. And I don't know about you, but I live in Troy and my house is much older than 1978. So I know that there is paint inside and outside the building that contains lead in it. And unfortunately, old paint can chip, flake, and deteriorate, turning into dust and soil. We also have the issue of lots of building demolitions, right? And tons of renovations. We've got these really old buildings and we're trying to renovate them, and this can create lead dust and fires as well. And so we know there have been over the past few years some fires in North Central and other parts of Troy as well. This happens in a lot of old cities. As I said before, lead in gasoline was used between 1930 and 1990. It really peaked in the 1970s, and all that exhaust from cars caused lead to settle from the atmosphere into the soil. And then we think of lead in water pipes as this really old problem, right? It's this ancient infrastructure, but old houses and water systems can still have lead pipes. There weren't restrictions on this until pretty recently. So this is a matter of concern in a lot of places. So when we think about why would we even have lead in the soil here, we have to think about our built environment, that, you know, when we renovate, when we have empty lots because a building was demolished, when there's a fire, and when we're just living in these older spaces, there's a lot of different possibilities for lead to be in our environment. And finally, of course, industrial sites like smelters, waste incinerators, battery recycling facilities, all of these kinds of industrial production can emit lead that also settles into soil. So, big question, how can we reduce exposures to lead? And I'm going to hand things over to Monica right now, and she could share a little bit more from her perspective about how we can prevent lead exposure.
Thanks so much, Abby. And yeah, I think that one thing is that there has been a tremendous amount of research on the fate and transport of lead in the environment, exposure routes. Actually, one of my colleagues for her dissertation filmed little kids playing to see how often they put something in their mouth. So she would give them a bunch of toys and just, you know, clock in time the amount of times they put objects from the floor in their mouth or just their hands directly into their mouth. Even so much, the research has looked at what size particles, like when we think of the soil, certain amounts, like the smaller particles actually stick a little bit more to our hands. And so we actually have perfected, like if we're going to look at children's exposure, what what diameter of the soil we should analyze, or what to understand that exposure even more readily. And so there's been a lot of research, and along with that understanding of research is the biomonitoring, which has led to these understandings that there is what levels should be and pediatricians should be aware of in children's blood, as well as that there is no safe level. But the very important thing and the good news is that this exposure is preventable. And so you can see here how critical it is to talk to a pediatrician about concerns. As an environmental health scientist, when we think about the clinical setting and doctors, this is one metal and contaminant that doctors are very much familiar with, and to have that conversation and work with families. And we know ways to prevent and reduce and have intervention. So you can see here, right, there are ways to test paint and dust in your home. There's actually, it's called ghost wiping, right, where you can actually use these wipes and they can be easily analyzed to get a concentration to then compare to what would be acceptable and not. You can see renovating safely. And so this is actually a very important practice, and another project going on in rural California. We noticed that this renovation activity is actually contributing to arsenic and porch dust in these rural settings. Luckily, there is this recall for toys and jewelry, again, going back to that paint, right, just being this source of lead. And then really, not allowing children to play in dirt next to old homes, just with this, taking on this precautionary principle approach of understanding that we know these old homes will get weathered and that paint will chip off over time. And so studies do show that the closer, if it is an older home, the soil is right next to, and then gradually right next to will have a little higher concentration of lead and then go down as you move away from that source. The one thing is that we call soils a sink for pollutants like lead. And so what happens is that that lead just sits and doesn't necessarily move too much because of the soil chemistry, which we could talk about later. And Creating these safe yards and gardens and play areas is critical. And there are very easy ways to do that in terms of, and based on how you and your family might, or any family might be using that space. And I did want to highlight, right, that the work we're doing here together is like my colleague in Mexico was Diaz Barriga, did a whole big study of like, this is like, families just living in active mining areas, and was noticing that, that it really needed peer education. And so what's going on here is great to see, because Diaz Barriga did this whole, he did three things. He educated parents, he did novelas and more of like theater with children, and then also incorporated the arts, and we took blood samples of children before those three activities, and then took blood samples after those three activities, and was able to show a significant decrease in the lead blood levels after these type of learning and peer education and community gathering experiences. So we are in a really good place to address this issue that unfortunately plagues a lot of us across the planet. Next slide, I think. Yeah, I don't know if And one of the things that we'll talk about when we have the soil justice trainings and over the weekends in August is this idea of recognizing that we get so many nutrients from soils. And so soils are critical to our health, the health of the ecosystems and health of humans. And one of the things that we also know that we want to increase our nutritional levels in general, and that these the better we have, the higher our nutrition and the more we eat these type of elements like calcium and iron and vitamin C, it boosts our ability to combat, right? Not fully like just replace, but to combat the exposures to environmental pollutants like lead. But there has been some really good research showing the role of, for example, folic acid in mitigating some of inorganic arsenic exposures in different parts of the world. And so this is, we're showing this slide to highlight the nutritional foods for us as humans, and then to tie that to maintaining healthy soils so that we can actually have foods that will properly accumulate these nutrients for our environment, for our personal and family health.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Monica. I think we could probably ask you so many questions, and I want to make space for people to do that. Does anybody want to ask any questions right now? And if not, I want to pass the mic over to Saeed to talk a little bit about specific things we're going to be working on together as Soil Justice Fellows, thinking about addressing if you think that soil might have lead in it. But we can also take questions.
I have a question. It said to place mulch and any other coverings over the yard. Is it just for when they're playing? Because I know you wouldn't want to grow food from the soil that may have lead in it, correct?
Yeah, that's a great question. Saeed, do you want to talk a little bit about what we can do to cover areas, and then what we would do differently for play areas and garden areas?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Ronya. Well, maybe I'll just start with mulch. I mean, usually one mulches the covers, not just with mulch, but could be some permanent grass cover, or anything that is permanently covering the soil if it is found out to be with elevated levels of lead or other heavy metals for that matter. So that's something that one would do. Suppose it depends on what one is planning. I mean, if it's a play area, then you want to make sure that all of the dust is kept down. That's what the mulch would be for, and that would be why we'd have a permanent grass cover, for example, or shrubs and stuff like that. But just making sure that the soil surface is covered at all times throughout the year. And but if you're gardening, then you might want to prepare your garden area. Make sure that you have a mask and gloves on at all times. If you know that there are high lead levels there, you can still work the soil. It'd be best if you can do a raised bed with imported soil that is guaranteed to be clean of lead and any other heavy metal. And then once you do the raised bed, then you can plan out with the mulch where it could be placed, since you wouldn't know ahead of time necessarily. So these would be some aspects that one might want to consider. when you do grow vegetables or whatever other kinds of edible plants, doing it on raised beds is crucial in polluted soils, and doing it away, or as far away as you can from nearby walls that have been that are old, maybe had chip paint on it, but also just in general, just to stay clear of walls as much as you can, because you can also have airborne dust that might be contaminated or could have contaminants attached to it, and then it just falls because the wall just serves as an obstacle, and then it falls near the wall, the bottom of the wall. So that's another consideration. And once you do grow food, whatever it may be, you should make sure that that you wash it thoroughly. I mean, ideally, one would have some digestible soap or something to that effect, that is a bit more of a thorough wash for vegetables. But one of the things to consider is also the type of vegetables that one would grow. If you have a lead problem or another heavy metal, or let's say cadmium or nickel or whatever, you should not grow root vegetables, for example, if you have a lead problem in the soil, and because it's really hard to scrub that part of edible material. Lead and like heavy metals have a very hard time getting into veggies, so long as well, I don't want to talk about soil chemistry yet, but so long as the pH is kept above 5.5, towards 6, above 6, it's very difficult for heavy metals like lead to get into the roots and get into the vegetables. However, you might want to consider, if you are close to a road or a street that is heavily trafficked, consider having whatever you grow, or if anybody's playing around in the yard, to have some sort of distance, as much as possible. Ideally, like, I don't know, maybe at least 5 meters. What's that in English equivalent? I guess it's like 15, 20 feet at least, but much, and then having some sort of windbreak, like vegetation, like permanent shrubs or other kinds of trees that are evergreen and at different levels of having dense leaves, because that acts as a windbreak, and that also can protect you from any dust that comes in that could be contaminated from incoming traffic, for example. Going back to what Monica has stated with respect to the layout, the closer you get to walls, usually the higher the concentration of a heavy metal might be, especially with the lead. But you can also observe oftentimes the same thing. The closer you get to a street, the more you have cadmium, nickel, and other heavy metals that are released every time a car just brakes, or just the friction of the movement of the car releases a lot of heavy metals. And finally, aside, for protecting yourself from the dust and keeping the dust down as well, of course, whatever you use to work the soil, again, if you have found out that it's contaminated, then make sure that you always thoroughly clean everything, and that you do it outside and not bring it in the home, because it just builds up as dust that people breathe. So I think I could field more questions about this, and we can talk a bit more about it if there are questions, or else we can move on.
Why don't we go on? I do see another question that has come up, which is, there's so many species and life in soil necessary for a healthy, balanced system, and this is so underreported. Where are some good places to get soil tested for these things in the USA? Well, one of the things that we're doing in this project is actually the folks who have signed up to be Soil Justice Fellows in August will be learning how to test the soil themselves with some simple chemistry tests that we can work with, working together as a group. There are also, you can also send samples to be tested. The main place that I know of here in Troy, if that's where you're watching from, is through the Cornell Cooperative Extension. So they have, you can collect samples, they'll give you some instructions, and they'll send that to a lab to be analyzed, and will tell you concentration of lead in that soil sample. Would any, Monica or Saeed or Dan, do you want to add anything else about how people can find this out for themselves?
Well, there is an extension service in New York State. It's through Cornell University, and if you look up Cornell Extension Service, they will have information, including lab testing. And then there's also City University of New York, CUNY, Brooklyn College. They have an urban soil lab, and they also will do soil analyses there. I would highly recommend not just analyzing soils, but also vegetables that you grow periodically, especially leafy vegetables, because they tend to accumulate a lot more heavy metals if you're going to grow them. But I would not advise you to grow leafy vegetables if you're doing if you're gardening on a heavily contaminated soil. You can still garden, but avoid those and avoid root vegetables. The other thing is there's of course the nationwide, what is it called, the Ameri test. Is that what it's called? But you can also send soil samples. Sorry?
Test America.
Test America. I've got it all reversed. Thanks. So those are some options. And but more than that, if you look at the Extension Service guidelines, they also, I just want to make sure to add that they also have recommendations as to what to look out for and what to avoid doing in the garden as well. And if that's information that's useful to anybody, I can send you details about it later as well.
Yeah, and we've actually put together a lot of different information that might answer some of these questions for people on our website. And I can post that link in the chat in just a minute. I want to read one more question here. Since lead falls from the sky to settle on land, it goes everywhere, including food. How do we avoid that? We can mitigate some harm with precautions, but what can consumers do to influence change? And I really think there's two really important dimensions to this question, right? How do we, where is lead coming from, and how can we avoid exposure to it? But then also, what are some things we can do to influence change, to stop the sources of lead in our environment now? Would anybody like to try to tackle that question?
I guess I just want to highlight that there are multiple exposure routes to, unfortunately, like we're bombarded with chemicals as well as lead and in other heavy metals, right, in general. And so different, each pollutant might have a different, if we think about all these exposure routes, like inhalation, we think about ingestion of foods, water, dust, like, particles, and then even dermal absorption, right? These are, so when we think about exposure in general, just to cover, like when the kind of questions that Saeed was answering is like, when we think about these exposures, we really think about the different pathways and routes, and then what pathway and route is most significant for that contaminant. And so, for example, like when we think about communities, so I work in communities neighboring like active mining, right? This would be like, we have, a smelter that's just, where we saw in unharvested rainwater, right, concentrations of arsenic and lead going down when there was a worker strike and shutting down that smelter, right? So it's showing definitely that this smelter was a source of arsenic and lead in the atmosphere, which was then kind of being harvested by the rain, or the particulates were settling on roofs, then captured in harvested rain cisterns and barrels and whatnot in this community. And so in this way, I wanted to just acknowledge that when we talked about food and uptake patterns, I do want to highlight that in general, like foods can accumulate. But when we think about the full exposure, we need to understand like people's behavior and as well as what they're doing. And so in some of the work I've done, it's actually that food does pose a source, but it's not the main source. And so when we think about where to like designate time and energy to mitigate and really reduce the major contributors. In some mining communities, it was very much about addressing their water source because they were on private wells. And another community was very much about addressing soils and properly washing the fruits and vegetables, and keeping ground cover to reduce any inhalation or ingestion of the dust from soils. And so I just want to kind of caveat that in general, we do know plants will accumulate. You won't get a plant with like 0 lead or arsenic, but I do think it's, I just wanted to highlight, right, that there's a different exposure pathways. And so how do we avoid that? One of the things is this idea of just like washing your fruits and vegetables, having the mulch and some type of nice ground cover, keeping those soils healthy is critical, as well as participating in the dialogue, right, at your local, state, and federal level around these issues. And so there is a question that came up about lead is found in baby foods. Where is that from, and what do we do about that? And it's this, heavy metals can leach into the fruits and vegetables from soil or water contaminated, but this contamination could be from industrial activity, fertilizers, right, or pesticides themselves. And so then there also could be the introduction by additives or minerals or different mixes to that food source. There's even was a study showing that an organic baby food company would properly harvest, but then they were having their food packaged in a plant where another company was having their food packaged there that wasn't doing the due diligence with the material. And so there was trace amounts of the contaminants from that other company that was left on the machine that would like sort nuts, or so I can't remember exactly what it was, but sort material that then had trace amounts in this baby food, right? And this came out with Silent Spring Institute doing a large study on food products. And so I'll stop at that point because of the time.
That's great. Thank you so much for addressing that question. I saw that one come up and I wasn't sure how to answer it. So I'm so glad you knew about it. So I think this is a good time to transition to talking about what we're going to be doing this summer, because it seems like folks who are watching this, whether they're on YouTube or on this call, have really good questions. And what we're trying to do is create an ongoing conversation and give people some tools to actually test soil themselves in places where some of these concerns might arise. So what we are doing this summer is we're going to be working with about 10 folks who have already signed up to be Soil Justice Fellows. If there are folks watching here who think, I really want to do this, reach out. There might still be some space. There might be some way to get you involved too. So if this is something that seems really interesting to you, definitely let me know. You can post that in the chat. You can, we'll share some contact information at the end. But the goal of this, that we're going to be meeting 2 different times to think about where soil lead and arsenic and copper might be present in our community. We're focusing on North Central Troy. We're going to learn how to test those soils to find out the concentrations of those heavy metals. And then we're going to spend a lot of time thinking about how do we act with this knowledge, right? So what are some of the things that we can do individually? What are some things that we can do collectively? What can we do as consumers, as citizens, as members of our community, and as people who can teach each other and reach out to other people in our community about how to make our neighborhoods safer? So what we want to do now is actually enlist all of you who are on this call. If you're watching on YouTube, we will be able to involve you as well. We want to start thinking about where we want to test the soil. So one of the things that's, we would love to know every single location. We'd love to know the concentration of lead everywhere we can look. That's a pretty big undertaking. It's not something we're equipped to do just yet. But we can start thinking carefully about where choosing soil samples is going to tell us something important about where we live, where we play, where we work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share in a minute in the chat. I'm going to share a link to something called Jamboard. Maybe some of you have used this before in school or work. It's basically just an interactive, it's like a Google Doc where we're going to look at some images and have some prompts, and we can use some of the tools on the page to add our comments. So I want everybody here to be able to add their thoughts to the page, and let's share the link to the Jamboard through the YouTube comments, I think. So the folks on YouTube should be able to do this as well. There's two tools I want to draw people's attention to once you get in here. One is this pen button. So if you want to circle something, draw lines, put a star, whatever. But the most useful one, I think, is the Post-it note button, which is going to bring up a little screen where you can type a comment and it'll put a colored Post-it note on the screen, and you can drag it somewhere so we can all see each other's comments together. If you're in this call today and you can't access Jamboard, that's okay. Post your comments. I'm going to share the screen of what we're looking at on the Jamboard, and you can post your comments either in the Zoom chat or in the YouTube comments, and we'll make sure to add your comments into the larger conversation. So let me, I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm in a minute. Let's see, I need to put the link in the chat. Hold on one second. Oh dear, I can't get out of there.
I have it to share, Abby, if that would be helpful.
Well, yeah, what happened is I switched over to it and I can't get back to the meeting. I don't know why it's not letting me. Here we go. Oh, here we go. I've got it. So if everyone could click over to that space, if you're on a computer where you can access it. Otherwise, I'm going to share what we're looking at here. Just one sec. What is it doing? Sorry, I'm having a little issue. All right, it seems like some people are starting to be able to access the link and join. That's great. I don't know why this is not letting me.
Are you trying to share?
Yeah, it's.
Do you want me to try?
Oh, here, I've got it. I think I've got it. It was just being very strange. Okay, so now everybody should, if you're in the Zoom call, you should be able to see the screen. But actually, if you want to add comments, I recommend you move away, stay in the call, but go over to the link so that you can comment and interact on these pages. So the very first one, we just want to have people put their thoughts here. What are your expectations for this project? So I could click on this sticky note here, and I'm gonna say I want to build relationships. And I can save it, and then I can move this anywhere on the page. So, and yeah, you can use the pen, although I find the sticky note to be a little bit easier. So what we're gonna do, we have a few different things. So the first one is just this question about what are your expectations? If you could take a minute to share something. And then we're gonna go through we're gonna spend just a minute, we're gonna look at some images and we're gonna have some short prompts. So share what your thoughts are at this point. What are your expectations for this project? Take a minute to think about it. I love what I'm seeing here already. This is amazing. Yes, yes. So awesome. These are so good. And we can keep adding to this. So this document is going to stay live for, you know, as long as we're working on this project. So if you have things that you want to add, as you keep thinking about it, you can start adding more comments here. Okay, so great. Here, I'm going to add a comment here. If you want to, so other people want to put things in the chat for one of us to add, we can do that easily. Great. Wonderful. Okay, so we'll keep this going, but let's go on to the next one. I want to hear what people have to say about our next slide. So here, the question is, how do you use soil? So we've put a couple of pictures here from the neighborhood around the sanctuary to start getting you thinking about this. But of course, the ways you use soil are not limited to gardening, growing food, or playing. Everybody think for a minute, what are some ways that you use soil? What role does it play in your life? Great, and I'm seeing comments coming in the chat, which I will add. These are beautiful. Yes. Okay, so good. So we're starting to think about some of the ways we use soil. So building on this, let's go on to the next one. Where do you see soil? So when you're out, oh, there was a comment here, we walk everywhere, right? So when you're out walking, where do you see soil? Or when you're going through your day, where do you see soil? Oh, wow, great. These are excellent observations. All right. Let's go on to another one. Where do you touch soil? So here we've got some images from playground in the neighborhood and also from the boat launch, the Ingalls Avenue boat launch. Just a couple of places people might touch soil, but I bet there are many more. Oh, wow. I hadn't even thought about teaching outdoor yoga as a place where you might touch soil. That's such a great example. What are some other places where you might end up touching soil? Think about all the places where you get dirt on your hands. You know, the garden comes to mind, but where we're sitting on the ground, any other places where you might, or other members of your family, like especially your kids. Okay, let's go on to the next one. This is kind of linked to what we were just talking about. Where do you or your kids get dirty? So is there a place in particular that you can think of where if you have kids, they come home with soil on their hands, on their knees, that come home with dirty faces? Or where can you think of that's happening to you as well? You might get dirty at work, right? There's probably places where you actually get soil, you know, depending on your job, you might get soil on you from where you work as well. So think about maybe there's a place in front of your building, a side yard where kids end up playing, any other locations that might be useful to think about. And if you could think of specific locations, so for example, saying here the playground, absolutely. Are there particular playgrounds that everybody here is interested in that we might be able to focus some sampling on? So if you have an intersection, a particular location that you want to share here, that's going to help us figure out where we're going to take samples. Oh, wow. Okay, here's a bunch. They all came up on my screen at once. Very cool. Oh, great. 7th and Ingalls. Yep. Yeah, always under the swings and the base of slides. That is a great observation. Doing farm work, mud puddles. Wow, yeah. Oh, these are great, great thoughts. This is going to help us a lot in thinking about where we want to collect samples. Amazing. Okay, definitely you can keep adding to this, but let's go on to the next one. Now we want to think a little bit, I mean, we've been talking a lot about soil as sort of scary and threatening, right? Because it contains contamination, or it might. But let's also think about how we can build better relationships with soil. So think about ways that soil helps you, and that, you know, if we improve the soil, we would be helped even more by it. Any ideas? I included this tree picture because having trees on our streets keeps things a lot cooler, right? It shades our buildings. And so trees rely on having soil deep under the pavement to grow. So that's one of the ways that soil helps us in a way that we often don't even think about. Oh, wow, growing medicinal plants, amazing. Wow, beautiful ideas, everyone. Excellent. So the next few things, I'm gonna share pictures like this. These are photos that Sarah took in the neighborhood just about a week ago. And there's a series of them. And what I want to do with these is just think a bit about what kind of reactions do we have, what feelings do we have when we think about the soil in each of these places. How do you feel about it? Do you feel curious? Do you feel concerned? Maybe you feel safe and secure. Maybe you feel proud of this particular space and the soil that is there under your feet. Do you feel worried? Are there other thoughts that you might have, or questions that you might have when you think about this place, which is the Little League field? Any reactions anybody might have? Okay, I got a comment, concerned. I'm going to add that. And as I think Branda mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we actually did, working with the young people who are part of the Uptown Summer Program, we did take a couple of samples in a few locations around the field. So we should at least have some preliminary screening soon to see what we know in a few different places around the ball field. I'm seeing some more comments here that I'm going to add in. Thank you. Okay. All right, you guys are amazing. Let's go on to the next one. So this is the playground. I can't remember the exact address of this, but you probably recognize it. It's near the apartments, the housing close to the river. Same questions. What feelings do you have? What questions do you have? And if folks are watching on watching this on YouTube as well and want to share anything, please feel free to put it in the comments and we'll keep checking back over there to see if there's anything. Okay, good question. Why isn't there mulch at the base of the playground? Good question, Eileen. Okay, wow, we've already been everyone's here is coming up with good ideas already about how to deal with potential hazards if there is something in the soil. Good additional comment here that complicates things. I'm going to add this from YouTube. So the comment I think has to do with, well, why would we want soil in a place where we play rather than say concrete? The comment is soil can be the conduit to replenish some aquifers. Water doesn't leach through concrete much. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind when we think about what kinds of barriers we might want to create between soil that might have some heavy metal hazards and where people are going to be exposed. So putting concrete everywhere isn't going to solve that, right? Yeah. Oh, great question here curious about the correlation between academic outcomes in these areas and possible lead exposure. Yeah, this is a really important question that we all have. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next one. We can go back and review these too. So the next one, this is a spot, I believe this is on 7th Ave, that I don't know what was here before. Maybe somebody knows. It looks like a recent demolition. If anybody has any ideas about what's going on at this site, you can share it here, but you can also add your feelings and comments and questions. Yeah, great question about fencing. Yeah, I would love to find out a little bit more about what's going on here. I really don't know. Good point about lack of signage. That does raise questions. Great thinking, everyone. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. How do you feel about the soil here? This is the playground. I'm sure you all recognize this is the playground next to the Troy Prep elementary school. Any thoughts? How do you feel about this site here? I will say one thing I noticed when we were walking by and taking pictures, there are raised beds for plants and there's mulch everywhere over the ground there. Yep, so we got one comment, worried. I think it makes sense to be worried about any place where our kids play. We want to have a look. It looks to me like a lot of what they're doing here is taking some of the steps that we would recommend. Looks neglected. Yeah, there are a lot of weeds. That's a good point. Let's see what else is in this comment. Yeah, is that mulch? That's one thing we could get a closer look at, right? If we could visit. Okay, good job. Let's look at a couple more places. So this is actually the backyard of Nature Lab. So this is the building. Kathy, can you say the exact address?
The building is at 3319 6th Avenue And again, it's between Glen and 101st and 6th.
So I was thinking with this picture, we can think about both this specific place, but also every backyard, right? In a way, this is kind of a typical backyard. We've got some grass, there's some exposed dirt, there's a tree. So you might think about some other backyards that you know of as well.
Two salads in one bowl. Do you want me to give it to you?
Okay. All right, let's go on. Oh, there's one more message from, okay, good question. Let's come back to that question in the chat in just a little bit. So let's go, let's look at another place that we've already heard discussed today, right? So this is this great new recreation area that's been expanded recently on 7th Ave with those sturgeon painted on the building there. So what kinds of feelings and questions do you have when you look at this place or this part? You know, you can think about the whole space. I know this picture doesn't capture everything that's happening there. And while we're doing that, there's a question that came up that's in the chat I think came from YouTube about any documentaries that people would recommend on this topic. I wonder if anyone else on here who's been working in this area might have some suggestions of documentaries that we could give to people who are curious. Okay. So I'm just being mindful of the time. We did start a little bit late today, but we have some things that we want to transition to for the folks who are going to be involved in taking soil samples. I want to make sure that we get some really important information to them about how to go about doing that. So what I'm going to do is everybody who has the link to this Jamboard presentation can continue to add your comments. And so what we want to do is use this activity to start thinking about places where you would like to take some soil samples so that we can test those samples together and decide what kinds of actions we want to take with the knowledge we gain from that. So start thinking about, maybe you want to think about one location that is really important to you personally. So maybe it's your yard, maybe it's a particular place where your kids play. And maybe think about another place that you think is really important to the neighborhood as a whole, right? Maybe it's some common area that knowing about that would benefit a lot of people. So please, feel free, even after this meeting, to click through the rest of these images. And on the very last one, I've just put a map of the neighborhood where maybe there's some particular places you could start marking. You could use the pen tool to draw circles around. You could put some comments about a particular address that interests you. And what we're going to do is we can continue using this space as a place to have a conversation about where we want to focus our efforts in figuring out what is in the soil. But now what I'm going to do is hand things over to Dan Walls, who is going to help all of our soil justice fellows collect samples of soil. So Dan, let me stop sharing my screen so Dan can start sharing his. Let's see. There we go.
Thanks, Abby. Can you all hear me?
Yep, and
Okay.
if you could just put that in presentation mode, it'll be a little bigger.
There we go. Right. So we'll be actually doing the soil testing in the first workshop when we first meet. So we'll need to take, everyone will actually need to take the soil samples and ahead of that. And so I'm going to provide soil sampling kits for everyone. And the kit is going to contain a pair of gloves, a garden trowel, a bucket that you can use to take soil, and then a paper bag and a plastic bag to collect the sample. So there will be actually 2 or 3 paper and plastic bags so that you can collect your samples you can collect either 2 or 3 samples. And then also in the kit, we'll include a informed consent form and a data agreement form. The informed consent is, Abby had explained it in the information session that we had a few weeks ago. But basically, it's agreeing to participate in our research project. And one of the big things is we would like to interview people after we do the workshops to see, how they're thinking about soil after going through them. And it'll be a confidential interview. It would only be between yourself, Abby, and I. And the data agreement is, so we're going to be generating results about the soils that everyone brings in, and we're going to be, using some tests that are color based, so they're going to give visual indication of what's in the soil. And so since we're doing it kind of in a group setting, the results that we generate, like it won't be like necessarily like private, so others in the workshop might like glance over at your test and see what's kind of coming up. And it would also be could be helpful to support one another depending on what we find and think through things together. So that form will just be kind of like a description of like what to expect in terms of that. And then also the last form that we'll include is, so we're participating in the workshops, you're going to get paid. So it's just like a tax form to fill out that we would submit to RPI. And Kathy let us know last time also, you get paid $225, which is below like the IRS rule of like $600. You don't actually have to report it on your taxes. And then for testing the soils, they have to be dry. So we're going to have to take them like a week in advance of the first sessions, which is going to be the weekend of August 14th. And so I'm going to be available between July 28th, this Wednesday, and August 4th, the following Wednesday, to either be at the nature lab for you to pick up and also drop off your soil samples in that window, pick up the sampling kit and then bring back your soil sample. Or alternatively, I can come to you with the sampling kit. I can either leave it with you or do the sampling with you at that time, and then I can take back the soil to the nature lab. And then that'll give us time to let those soil dry. So then when you come in on that first workshop, we'll be ready to go with them. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a demonstration on my kitchen floor here to kind of like, demonstrate like how to go about taking a soil sample. But before I do that, I just want to say a little bit about it. So depending on like where you're sampling the soil, if it's a garden area, the plant roots are going to be growing, within like a 6-inch zone from the surface. So that would kind of be like the depth you would be interested in sampling soil to. Alternatively, if it's like a space in your yard or in some other place where you're more just like you're playing or your kids are playing, we would want to sample to like a a shallower depth, 2 inches, just because that's going to be relevant to the soil that you're coming in contact with. I'm going to try and point my camera at the floor of my kitchen. And I have a garden trowel, a paper bag, a plastic bag, and a 5-gallon bucket. And I've taped out on my floor, like a 3-foot by 2-foot grid. And I've divided it into 6 sections. So you can do this, without the tape in the space that you want to sample, and divide it into 6 places. And what you can do is take your garden trowel, loosen the soil to the depth that you're interested in each of these 6 grids, scoop out the soil, and add it into the bucket. And so once you've sampled from those 6 spots, you can then mix the soil together within the bucket. And then once you've mixed it around, maybe there's like some bigger rocks, maybe there's like some leaf matter or something, you could pick that out. But we're also going to be sifting the soils to get, sorry, my cat is walking through the sample area. But yeah, don't worry too much about like other things that might be in the soil sample. We'll deal with that with the sifting. That I should also mention, if you're sampling in an area that has maybe some mulch in it, you can brush it to the side before you take the soil and then cover it back. So then once you've taken soil from your area and you've mixed it in your bucket, we'll give you a paper bag that you can then just carefully pour into the paper, your soil into. And then you're going to want to also take that paper bag and store it inside of the plastic bag that we'll give you. And working with the paper bag is a little bit bigger than what we'll give you. But the idea is that the soil is going to be wet to some extent. And so the plastic bag will help support the weight of the soil so the paper bag doesn't tear. And what you'll want to do also that we'll provide is we'll have a worksheet where you can document and label your samples so that you can remember where you took them from. So the worksheet will basically have a space for you to put a sample ID, which I can talk with you more when I actually hand you the sampling kit, but it will basically be like your initials and number 1, 2, or 3 that you'll want to put on the paper bag and also mark down on your sample sheet. And there's a spot to give a brief description of the area, a reminder to take a picture of that area, and then a few other details about the sample. Monica has also created a YouTube video for another project of hers that I'm going to share in the chat after I close my screen, after I stop sharing my screen. But that could also be a reference if you're interested in when you're doing the sampling. And again, if you would like my assistance to come out, or if you want to contact me, call me on the phone, talk through the sampling, feel free to do that. I'd be more than happy to assist.
That's great, Dan. Thank you so much. So I'm just looking at the time. It's 8:32. We did start a little bit late, but I thought if we could take 5 minutes now to just share what we're thinking, our reflections at this point, any questions people might have. And it could be questions about the practical logistics of where do you pick up your sampling bucket and how do you do that? Or maybe questions about some of those sites that we were looking at, and would it be a good place to collect a sample there, or any other feelings that you're having at this point after this discussion. So I'm going to open this up to just anyone who wants to share or ask.
I have an overview question that goes back to Monica's presentation. It was very exciting to hear about the people who were like collecting data on the relationship of art and science and how that made it a more effective result. And you, of course, I don't think we brought up the comic book, but very much this collaboration has art as an element. Kathy, you're one of the people on it. And I'm just wondering how you're hoping that that can add to kind of a body of research that links science and art to look at effective organizing and education.
It's a great question, Branda. Absolutely. Yeah, if people on this call haven't seen the comic book yet, let us know. And we've made, well, I think it's a pretty great comic book that explains a lot of the things that we talked about in this meeting today. And we have a version in English and a version in Spanish. So if there are places where you think it would be really good to get the word out about what's going on, it seems like people are really resonating with the comic book, people of all ages, from kids to elders. So that's one thing that we've been thinking about. And yeah, in terms of your question about research, one of the reasons why we are asking people to, if you're participating, to sign or to review this, what's called the informed consent form, is because this is part of a research project about how people experience these kinds of projects and what people learn, and what the process is like to try to put together a team like this that involves artists and scientists and community members. So yes, Brenda, to your question, we are really hoping to learn a lot. Not only about the conditions of our soil in Troy, but also about how we might be able to use these kinds of projects in other communities, expand to other neighborhoods in Troy, expand to involve more people, but also collaborate with people in other cities, doing the things that we find work well in this project. Okay, so Dan has posted a very important comment here in the chat. He included his email address as well as his phone number. And Kathy has also posted her the address of Nature Lab, which is crucial because everyone who's going to be participating needs to pick up their sampling kit so that they can go out and collect samples, maybe thinking a little bit about what we talked about today. What are some places where you would like to find out what's going on with the soil? Does anybody yet have an idea about where they do want to collect samples? Is anything on your mind right now?
The playground on South Pearl Street by School 12. I think School 12's playground.
Great idea. I think that's great. Now, one thing we want to talk about, so some places, if they're property that belongs to someone else, right? It's not your property and it's not public property. I think it's a good idea to talk to someone there about what you're doing. So for example, Branda, maybe you could say a little bit about what we did when we collected samples at the ball field.
Sure. Well, it was really a wonderful, engaged group. And I think what was most meaningful is that the youth who were doing the testing grew up playing baseball at the baseball field. And they called Uncle Mac, their coach, to check whether they could do it first. And I think that was really significant. But Dan laid out a wonderful demonstration. He taught everybody. And then we broke out kind of one-on-one, kind of fanning around the field to collect samples. And they're totally excited. They can't wait till next week. Dirt dries slowly and they're waiting.
They're waiting for it to dry. Yeah, I mean, I think it was a great example of how, the kids identified this as an important place. And then we connected with the adults who maintain that space to make sure that they also wanted to find out what was going on there. One thing that we might want to think about is, are there reasons why people wouldn't want to know whether there's lead or arsenic in the soil, right? So we have to think carefully about that when we're making decisions too, and think about how we maintain maybe the privacy of what we find when we collect samples. So, you know, there may be a reason why someone would not want attention to be drawn to the place where they're collecting samples. And we need to be mindful of that, talk with people about what we're doing. And also, we as the research team privacy is our really important concern for everyone, right? So if you're participating in this project and you're collecting samples from around your own home and you feel like maybe that's information you don't want publicly broadcasted, if it turns out that there is lead in the soil around your home and you just want to take care of that quietly, we're really mindful of that. We want to make sure that your privacy is respected in every stage of this process. But that also, you know, extends to our community members as well. So I would be happy to have, and I'm sure Dan as well would be happy to have follow-up conversations with each of you as you're deciding where to collect samples about what kind of conversations you want to have with us and with other people in the community as you go about this.
I will add one part to the process, which is that there were many microphones and cameras telling the story as this youth were learning, because it was important for them to pass it on, to use media arts as a way to tell their story. And so for those of you who are testing and want to have privacy, we will point the cameras the other way and we will point the microphones the other way. But we really, you know, are invested. That's one role of the sanctuary, is to actually creatively and evocatively tell this story of what we learned from the voice of the community who's living there.
Great, thank you for that. Well, I think that it's time to wrap up. So let's be in touch. So Sarah will continue to be the communication point person between the sanctuary and all the Soil Justice Fellows. So please be on the lookout for emails from her, maybe text messages and phone calls, and get in touch with Dan about picking up your sampling bucket. And I'll put my email address here as well in the chat.
You can also email us at info@mediasanctuary.org, and we will pass on the email to whoever needs it if you forget any of the above emails. So please feel free to remember that one, info@mediasanctuary.org. It can be found on our website too, which is mediasanctuary.org.
Great. All right, everyone, thank you so much for giving some time on a Sunday evening. Really appreciate it.